Marcus Chen had been looking forward to this moment for 3 years. 3 long years of saving every spare dollar, skipping dinners out, and driving his beat-up Honda Civic with the rattling exhaust and temperamental air conditioning. But today, finally, he was the proud owner of a brand-new Tesla Model 3 in pristine pearl white. He pulled into his assigned parking spot at Willowbrook Estates, the upscale townhome community where he'd been renting for the past year. The car gleamed in the afternoon sun, like a promise of better things to come. Marcus sat for a moment, just savoring the new car smell and the satisfaction of a goal achieved through hard work and determination. His phone buzzed with a text from his girlfriend, Sarah. "Can't wait to see the new ride. Picking me up at 7 for dinner?" Marcus smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. This baby is going to turn heads." He had no idea how right he was, just not in the way he'd hoped. The next morning, Marcus walked outside with his coffee and laptop bag, ready to head to his job at the tech startup downtown. What he saw made him drop both items. The ceramic mug shattering on the concrete walkway. His beautiful new Tesla was absolutely covered in what looked like raw eggs, flour, and some kind of red sauce that had dripped down the windshield like blood. Someone had also scratched an inconsiderate jerk into the pearl white paint on the driver's side door. What the hell? His hands shaking as he approached the vandalized car. A piece of pink stationery was tucked under the windshield. Wiper. Marcus pulled it out with trembling fingers, recognizing the flowery handwriting immediately. "Mr. Chen," the note read, "your vehicle was parked 2.3 inches over the designated parking line, violating HOA Code 47B regarding proper vehicle placement. This is your first and final warning. Future violations will result in towing at owner's expense. Respectfully, Margaret Thornfield, HOA President." Marcus stared at the note, his blood pressure rising with each word. Margaret Thornfield, the neighborhood's self-appointed queen bee. A woman in her late 50s who seemed to live for finding violations and issuing citations. She drove a pristine white BMW and had made it her personal mission to make life difficult for anyone she deemed undesirable in her perfect little community. But vandalizing his car? This went way beyond her usual passive-aggressive notes and formal complaints. Marcus pulled out his phone and started taking pictures, documenting every inch of damage. The repair costs would easily run into the thousands. His insurance would cover it, but his rates would probably go up. And all because his tire might have been a few inches over an arbitrary line? Oh my goodness, what happened? Marcus turned to see his neighbor from across the courtyard, Alina Rodriguez, hurrying over. Lena was a nurse at the local hospital. A single mom with twin 8-year-old boys who always waved at Marcus when he came home from work. She was also, Marcus had noticed over the past few months, absolutely beautiful with warm brown eyes and a smile that could light up a room. Margaret Thornfield happened, Marcus said grimly, holding up the pink note. Elena's face hardened. "She did this to your car? Over a parking violation, apparently?" "Well, I'm pretty sure I was parked fine yesterday." Lena shook her head in disgust. "This is insane. You have to report this to the police." "I'm going to. But first, I think I need to have a conversation with our dear HOA president." Alina touched his arm gently. "Marcus, be careful. Margaret has connections in this town. Her husband is on the city council, and she knows people. Don't give her any ammunition to use against you." The concern in her voice made Marcus's anger cool slightly. Alina was right. He needed to be smart about this, not reactive. "You're right," he said. "I'll file a police report, contact my insurance, and go through proper channels." "Good." Alina smiled at him, and Marcus felt that familiar flutter in his chest that he got whenever she was around. "If you need anything, a ride to work, someone to be here when the police come, just knock, okay?" Marcus watched her walk back to her townhome, admiring the way she moved with such grace despite clearly being in a hurry to get to work. He'd been wanting to ask Alina out for months, but something always held him back. Maybe it was because she was going through a difficult divorce. Or maybe it was because he was afraid of ruining the easy friendship they'd developed. But right now, he had bigger problems than his complicated feelings for his neighbor, the police. An officer who responded to Marcus's call was sympathetic, but not particularly optimistic about catching the vandal. Without witnesses or security footage, it's going to be hard to prove, Officer Kim explained as she filled out the report. Even with the note, Mrs. Thornfield could claim someone else wrote it, but it's clearly her handwriting. I have dozens of HOA notices from her. That might help, but property damage cases like this, they're tough. Your best bet is probably through your insurance and maybe small claims court. Marcus thanked the officer and spent the rest of the morning dealing with insurance adjusters and getting estimates for repairs. By the time he finally made it to work, he was 3 hours late and seething with frustrated rage. His coworker Jake took one look at him and whistled low. Rough morning? Marcus filled him in on the whole story. Jake, who lived in a regular apartment complex and thought HOAs were fascist organizations for people with too much time on their hands, was appropriately outraged. Dude, you can't let her get away with this, Jake said. People like that only understand one thing: consequences. What am I supposed to do? Key her car? I'm not a criminal. No, but you're a software engineer with a very particular set of skills, Jake said with a grin. And didn't you say she's always finding tiny violations in the HOA rules? Marcus raised an eyebrow. What are you getting at? I'm saying maybe it's time someone started. Is paying very close attention to whether the HOA president herself is following all those rules she's so fond of enforcing. That evening, Marcus sat on his small patio with a beer and his laptop, supposedly working on code for his startup. But instead, he found himself researching everything he could about Willowbrook Estates. HOA, rules and regulations. The document was 127 pages long and covered everything from approved paint colors to the exact specifications for holiday decorations. It was obsessively detailed, and Marcus realized it was almost impossible for anyone to follow perfectly. A soft knock on his patio door made him look up. Lena stood there with a plate covered in aluminum foil and a concerned expression. "Brought you some dinner?" she said when he opened the door. "Figured you probably didn't feel like cooking after the day you've had." The plate contained perfectly seasoned chicken enchiladas, Spanish rice, and refried beans. It smelled incredible, Lena. "You didn't have to do this," Marcus said, but he was touched by the gesture. "I wanted to. Besides, the boys always insist I make way too much food." She paused, looking at his laptop screen. "Are you reading the HOA bylaws? Guilty?" "I figured if Margaret wants to play by the rules, I should know what the rules actually." Aralina sat down in the chair across from him. "Find anything interesting?" "Oh, you have no idea. Did you know that garbage cans must be stored completely out of view from the street except between the hours of 6 p.m., the night before pickup, and 6 p.m. the day of pickup? And that any vehicle parked in a driveway for more than 72 consecutive hours is considered abandoned and subject to towing. Seriously, that's not even the best part. Listen to this. All landscaping must consist of drought-resistant plants, native to the region, with no more than 30% of front yard space dedicated to decorative rocks or hardscaping materials." Alina laughed, and the sound made Marcus's heart skip. "I'm pretty sure Margaret has those big decorative boulders taking up like half her front yard." "She does. And I don't think those roses in her flower bed are native to Southern California either." They spent the next hour going through the bylaws together, finding violation after violation that Margaret herself was guilty of. Her BMW was often parked in her driveway for days at a time. Her garbage cans were visible from the street year-round. Her landscape lighting didn't comply with the lumens restrictions. Even her house numbers weren't the approved font. "This is kind of therapeutic," Alina admitted. "After all the nasty letters she sent me about the boys' bikes being improperly stored on our patio. She's complained about your kids." Elena's expression darkened. "Oh, constantly. The bikes, their toys, the noise they make playing in the courtyard. She even tried to get them banned from using the community pool because they were disturbing other residents by laughing too loudly." Marcus felt his anger toward Margaret intensify. Going after him was one thing, but targeting Elena's children? That crossed a line. She can't do that. Kids are allowed to play and make noise during reasonable hours. Try telling her that. She's made it clear she thinks children don't belong in upscale communities like this one. They were sitting closer now, the laptop balanced between them as they scrolled through the increasingly ridiculous rules. Marcus was acutely aware of Elena's presence, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The soft scent of her perfume, the way her hand brushed his. When she pointed at something on the screen, "Marcus," she said softly, and when he looked up, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Thank you for this, for making me laugh after such a crappy day. I haven't had anyone to just talk to like this in a long time." "Me neither," he admitted. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Marcus felt the air between them charged with possibility. But then Elena's phone buzzed with a text breaking the spell. "The boys," she said, checking the message. "To go check on their homework, of course. And Elena, thank you for dinner. And for this." He gestured at the laptop at the evening they'd shared. She smiled. "Anytime, neighbor." After she left, Marcus sat alone on his patio thinking. He'd always been attracted to Elena, but tonight he'd seen a different side of her, sharp, funny, rightfully angry at injustice. Unless he was completely misreading the signals, she might be interested in him too. But first, he had a score to settle with Margaret Thornfield. Marcus's opportunity came sooner than expected. The next morning, as he was leaving for work in his rental car, his Tesla was still in the shop. He noticed Margaret's BMW parked in her driveway with a thick layer of dust on it. According to his research, it had been sitting there for at least 5 days, well over the 72-hour limit. He also noticed that her garbage cans were sitting right next to her front door, clearly visible from the street. Even though pickup wasn't until Thursday, Marcus smiled grimly and pulled out his phone to start documenting. Over the next week, he became a surveillance expert. He photographed Margaret's roses. Definitely not native species. He measured her decorative rocks with a surveyor's app. They covered 47% of her front yard space. He documented every infraction with timestamps and GPS coordinates. But the piece de resistance came when Marcus discovered that Margaret had been running a small business selling essential oils out of her home, clear violation of the No Commercial Activities clause in the HOA agreement. Elena, who had become his unofficial partner in the investigation, was impressed by his thoroughness. "You've got enough violations here to keep her busy for months?" she said, scrolling through the evidence on Marcus's laptop. "That's the plan. But I want to do this right. Professional, by the book." "Very mature of you," Elena said with a grin. "Much more mature than what I probably would have done." "Oh yeah. What would you have done?" Elena's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Let's just say her precious roses might have had an unfortunate encounter with some rock salt." Marcus laughed, loving this playful side of her. Over the past week, their evening research sessions had become the highlight of his day. They'd moved beyond just documenting Margaret's violations to talking about everything: their jobs, their dreams, their past relationships. Marcus had learned that Elena's ex-husband had been controlling and emotionally abusive, that she'd left him with nothing but the clothes on her back and her 2 boys. She'd worked double shifts as a nurse to save up enough money to move to Willowbrook, wanting her children to have a stable, safe home. Elena had learned that Marcus had grown up poor, that buying the Tesla represented years of sacrifice and discipline, that his parents had worked 3 jobs between them to put him through college. They understood each other in a way. It felt rare and precious, which made what happened next even more infuriating. Marcus was coming home from work on Thursday evening when he saw a tow truck in the parking area. His heart sank as he realized it was hooked up to Elena's small Honda Civic. "Hey!" Marcus called out, running toward the truck. "What's going on?" The tow truck driver, a burly man with grease-stained coveralls, shrugged. "Got a call from the HOA. Vehicle's been reported as abandoned." "Abandoned? That's ridiculous. The owner lives right there. Not my problem, buddy. I just do what I'm told." Marcus looked around frantically and spotted Margaret Thornfield standing on her porch, arms crossed, watching the scene with obvious satisfaction. "Margaret," he called out, "this is Elena's car." "He lives here?" "You know she lives here." "The vehicle has been parked in the same spot for more than 72 hours, Margaret replied coolly. "That's a clear violation of the parking regulations." "She's been working double shifts at the hospital. She takes the bus when her car stays parked. Rules are rules, Mr. Chen." Marcus felt his carefully maintained composure finally snap. Elena worked herself to exhaustion taking care of other people, came home to raise her boys alone, and never complained about any of it. The idea that Margaret would target her out of some petty vendetta made his blood boil. "Want to play?" "This game," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Fine, let's play." The next morning, Marcus put his plan into action at exactly 9 a.m. He submitted a formal complaint to the HOA board documenting every single one of Margaret's violations, complete with photographs, timestamps, and relevant bylaw citations. The 47-page document was a masterpiece of bureaucratic warfare at 10 a.m. Filed a complaint with the city about Margaret's unlicensed business activities at 11 a.m. He submitted a report to the county about potential water waste violations in Margaret's non-native landscaping, but the coup de grace came at noon. When the tow truck Marcus had hired arrived to remove Margaret's BMW, he'd done his homework. According to city parking regulations, any vehicle parked on a public street for more than 72 hours could be towed. Margaret's BMW had been parked on the street outside her house for a full week while she had work done on her driveway. Marcus stood on his patio, sipping coffee and watching as the tow truck driver hooked up Margaret's pristine white BMW. The woman herself came running out of her house in her bathrobe, shrieking like a banshee. "You can't do this? That's my car?" "Ma'am, I have authorization from the city," the driver said calmly, handing her a clipboard of paperwork. "Vehicle's been reported as abandoned on a public street. This is harassment. I'll sue." "You're right, ma'am. Your car will be at Municipal Impound Lot B. You can collect it once you pay the fees." Margaret's face turned an interesting shade of purple as her BMW disappeared down the street. She spun around, scanning the courtyard, and her eyes landed on Marcus. "You," she screamed, pointing an accusatory finger. "This is your doing." Marcus raised his coffee mug in a mock toast. "Rules are rules, Margaret." The next few weeks were glorious chaos. Margaret's attempts to fight, Marcus's complaints fell flat when faced with his meticulous documentation. The HOA board, made up of her own neighbors who were tired of her tyrannical behavior, sided with Marcus on every violation. Margaret was fined nearly $3,000 and ordered to correct all infractions within 30 days. The city inspector who investigated her essential oils business was not amused to discover she'd been operating without proper licenses or permits. That resulted in additional fines and a cease and desist order. But the best part was watching Margaret try to navigate the bureaucratic maze she'd spent years inflicting on others. Getting her car back from impound required forms in triplicate, proof of ownership, payment of fees, and a half-day wait at the municipal building. Alina, meanwhile, had gotten her Honda back the same day it was towed, once Marcus provided documentation that she was a legal resident who had been working. The towing company even waived the fees once they realized the complaint was frivolous. "I can't believe you did all that," Alina said one evening as they watched Margaret struggling to install drought-resistant plants in her front yard. "It was like watching a master class in strategic revenge." "She earned every bit of it," Marcus replied. "Nobody messes with my car, and they definitely don't mess with you." Lena looked at him with something that might have been admiration. "You know, when I first moved here, I thought you were just this quiet tech guy who kept to himself. And now? Now I think you might be the most interesting person I've ever met." They were sitting close together on Elena's patio this time, watching her boys play soccer in the courtyard while the sun set behind the mountains. Marcus had been coming over for dinner almost every night, and the easy intimacy between them had grown into something deeper. "Elena," Marcus said, gathering his courage, "I have a confession to make." She turned to face him, eyebrows raised. "I've wanted to ask you out for months, long before the Margaret situation, but I kept making excuses. We're dealing with your divorce. I didn't want to complicate our friendship. I wasn't sure if you were interested." Alina smiled, and Marcus felt his heart flip. "What changed your mind? Watching you get angry about injustice? Seeing you laugh at Margaret's ridiculous rules? Realizing that you're not just beautiful, you're brilliant and funny and kind, and you make me want to be braver. Brave enough to risk our friendship for the chance of something more." Alina was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus began to worry he'd misread the situation entirely. But then she reached over and took his hand. "Marcus, I've been waiting for you to ask me out for months too." "Really?" Really, I thought maybe after you got your new car, you'd feel confident enough to make a move. Instead, you got into a war with the HOA president. Marcus laughed. Not exactly how I planned to impress you. Are you kidding?
Watching you take.
Down Margaret Thornfield was the sexiest thing I've ever seen. And then Alina was kissing him, soft and sweet under the darkening sky. And Marcus thought that maybe getting his car vandalized was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Months later, Marcus and Alina were officially dating. The boys had accepted him into their little family with surprising ease, especially after he taught them how to code simple video games on his laptop. Margaret Thornfield had moved out of Willowbrook Estates, claiming the community had become unsuitable for decent people. She'd been replaced as HOA president by Mr. Patterson, a retired teacher who believed in common sense over arbitrary enforcement, and Marcus's Tesla. Once it was repaired and returned, had never looked better. He'd even had Alina help him pick out custom license plates. Justice won. Do you think she'll ever forgive you? Alina asked one evening as they sat in his car, looking out over the city lights from the hills above town. Margaret, I don't really care, Marcus admitted. She brought it on herself. No regrets? Marcus looked at Alana, beautiful, smart, kind Alina, who'd become the center of his world, and shook his head. The only thing I regret is not asking you out sooner. Alina leaned over and kissed him, and Marcus marveled at how perfectly his life had turned out. Sometimes the best revenge was simply living well, surrounded by people who mattered. And sometimes the best revenge was also the most justified. As they drove home through their quiet neighborhood, past houses filled with families and dreams, and the messy, beautiful complications of real life, Marcus couldn't help but smile. He'd gotten his car back, gotten justice, and gotten the girl. Not bad for a quiet tech guy who supposedly kept to himself. The end.